Honored guest. My name is Nikkei Roach, and it's a pleasure to be with you once again, where we get to sit around fireside to have conversations with interesting and fascinating individuals throughout the globe, sharing success stories on what it is in parenting. And if you hear that in the background, that is obviously a baby crying, and that is totally okay because we all were crying one day. And today is no exception. We have an honored guest, Pastor Jimmy Davis, who has a story probably very few pastors have ever come. He's passionate, he's inquisitive, he creates stories in his message, and his calling. And his story will probably impact you. And I can't say it'll be better than your pastor or your spiritual leader, but his story really moved me because his path took him so many different ways and so many different paths. And that's the purpose of our conversation to show that each person has a unique path. And sometimes there's a little failure in there, but through that failure, we grow and we're more successful. Whether we're a parent, we're a business owner, we're a massage therapist, or we're a spiritual leader. My guest tonight and today and this morning, wherever you're hearing this, is Pastor Jimmy Davis. Jimmy, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Well, thank you very much for being here today, and I'm glad you're. And I guess that in the background was your baby.
Yes, baby Elijah is having a fit, and so it's that stage between trying to not let him have too much TV time and let him soothe himself, and the whole fun bit. It's our first. I'm 39 years old with my first child, and so it can be a touch on the nerves a little bit, but it's a learning process, and I have a wonderful wife that really is better than me at a lot of things. So that's a blessing.
I believe you are correct. I have met your wife many times, as a matter of fact. So let's go straight to the jugular vein. I'm just kidding. Let's go straight into who is Jimmy Davis. Can you talk us into how you got just a little bit, and then we'll filter in some more questions after that. Tell us who you are.
Okay, well, usually I would identify myself proudly as something that it's like this, and it would be that I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm a recovering addict, and my name is Jimmy Davis. I always like to identify myself, where I find my identity in, which is in the God of my understanding, Jesus Christ, and then I'm a recovering addict. Some people who share the same faith as me would say, you should never claim that. You should never say that. But, for me, the reality is I know who I am deep down inside. I know what I'm capable of without God in my life. And then thirdly, the name given to me, Jimmy Davis. And coming from a background of addiction, I've been down a rough road. But with that being said, I think we all have had different roads, and addiction is just one of them. It's not above or below any of them, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Now, kind of backing up a little bit further than that, and since you did bring that up, and there's so many folks, who are listening who are totally understanding of what addiction is, and sometimes we think addiction is in a classic sense, alcohol, controlled substances. But there's also addictions in, drama. There's addiction in pornography. There's addiction in politics, if you will. So you display that right out front and say, hey, I'm vulnerable. I am a recovering addict. And I'm going to tell you that up front so that you won't get sideswiped and say, hey, I'm a pastor too. But let me give you a little perspective. Can you give us some insights on that?
Well, yeah, certainly. So identifying as an addict for me isn't just identifying as a normal person. Well, some would say an addict isn't normal, but like you said, I've been in pastoring and being around ministry. I've been around enough people. I think I have the right to say this without calling names, that Christian men and women, again, I repeat, Christian people of faith, struggle with many things behind closed doors and sometimes even openly. Well, like you said, whether it be pornography, staggering statistics would tell you 7 out of 10 Christian men either currently or have at one point in their life struggle with pornography. 7 out of 10. Okay. And that's we could go to shopping. We can go to gossiping, like you said, drama. We can go to anemia. I mean, there's all kind of addictions, all kind of habits and hurts that we've been through. You know, they say there's this phrase that hurt people hurt people. And early on in my life, I mean, obviously I didn't come out of the womb doing drugs, but, you know, I reached a point in my life, whether I've been through a lot of things that added up, whether it be having my heart broken, whether it be trying to find friends, whether it be trying to find a place to fit in, whether it be trying to cover up a hurt I'm going through. And eventually that led me to trying out drugs, and it led me to a heroin addiction, which led me to a prison sentence. And yeah, that's not the norm for a pastor's story. I don't know if to say fortunately or unfortunately. I think that my story will not be so uncommon in the coming generations. That because of the epidemics that we've had with drugs and alcohol, that I think God is drawing people from all areas of life to be used if we answer that call.
Totally. So what was the pivotal moment in your life? I mean, can you narrow it down to that moment when you were at that place and you and something changed? There was a brick wall you hit. There was something you hit. I mean, I don't know if it was a literal brick wall, but I mean, oftentimes there is a pain, there is something that causes us to change directions or go down the same path. What was that brick wall? And then talk us through the next step after that.
Well, you said brick wall, and it happened to be a brick cell. Yeah, cinder block cell, whatever it was made out of. I know it was hard, and I wasn't getting out of it. So I got arrested. I was eventually arrested for crimes stemming from my drug addiction, whether it be theft, aggravated robbery charges, drug possession charges, which I own. I take full responsibility for. I always say they're stemming from my addiction, like that's a result, but I own, you know, it's not an excuse. I own my mistakes. But yeah, I was in jail, and I remember just kind of withdrawing from heroin, which is not a fun process at all. The jail I happened to get booked into didn't have any open cells, so I was on what's called a boat, basically a plastic bed that they make for you. And I was laying on the floor in the common area, and you know, I seen in the distance a shelf, and it had those little Bibles on it, those little green and blue Gideon Bibles that nobody ever reads, that you find stacks of everywhere. And as I was looking at them, I just, you know, backed into a wall, if you would, and asking myself, you know, what's the purpose here? What am I doing? And really, I came to that conclusion. And my prayer was, I reached out to God and just said, God, this is who I am. Whether I was made this way, whether I have a disease, whether we have, you know, there's so many arguments what addiction is. I wasn't trying to figure that out. All I knew was, Lord, this is who I am. I can't change it. If I get out of here, I want to use again. And if the only way for me to change that is if you change it. And he showed up in a mighty way. I did end up serving 3 years in prison. I wish I could say that when I came to the Lord that, you know, I walked into the courtroom and the judge said, oh, you know, young man, I can see that you have the Lord in your life now, so we're going to take it easy on you. But to be honest with you, I had already concluded that I must face my mistakes. I must face my crimes, my sins, who I am and what I've been, and own that and own it. And so I was ready as I could be to serve that sentence. But yeah, I was being backed in the wall. I was being backed up in a corner, not, you know, and being asked really what the purpose of life is, what my purpose is. And I could only draw back on when I first had any exposure to really faith, which was like when I was 16, 17 years old, going to a church. So I wasn't even drawing from, you know, growing up. I didn't have church growing up. I didn't have that exposure. And so I just kind of drew to what faith I knew of, and I sought God, and I think that he really helped me to overcome that.
Absolutely. Amen to that. So now that you hit the brick wall, you know, you're there, you're in your cell, you find a little Gideon's Bible, like you said, nobody reads apparently. Now, what happens next? Let's move out of the 3 years. You're in there 3 years.
Okay.
You finally, you know, hey, the judge says, hey, you did your time. You know, apparently there was a revelation inside of incarceration. What happened the day you got out?
Well, the day I got out, I actually went to what's called a 3-quarter house, and I had to spend a couple months there. It's kind of like a in-between place from prison to society. I had to go there and still stay there and abide by the rules and slowly to get a job and do bunch of these classes and stuff they required of us. And so that's what I did at first. But I was already determined, my whole sentence, I was already determined that my life was already turned over to the Lord, and I was determined to live the life on his terms and not mine. And so I answered a call. I really felt a call to be a preacher. But yeah, I struggled with that because before I can do any of that, I had to get my own life in order. You see, the thing is when I stopped doing drugs and then I had to face the reality, I always, in my experience, getting off the drugs was the easy part. Now I had to learn how to manage my emotions. What am I going to do when I get mad, when I get angry, when I get anxious, impatient, sad, happy? What am I going to do with these feelings? Because I did drugs for so long that I didn't feel any feeling I had, I'm getting high. And so that really was the main thing. What do I do when I get a paycheck and I actually am not spending it on drugs? Am I going to pay my bills correctly? Am I going to save correctly? It sounds kind of pathetic, but that's the reality, and that's the truth. And having anxieties from that, having to learn like a kid, like a teenager, as a grown man, and trying to learn how to manage my emotions on a day-to-day life aside, because at that point, the easy thing would have been just to get high and not take responsibility. And so once I got to the point of finding people in my life, mentors, going to meetings, whether they be NA or AA, going to church, Celebrate Recovery, finding people in my life that I can look at. I heard someone say one time that we don't ever invent ways of doing things. We always look at somebody else and we notice what they're doing and we pick up on things from an early age. And so I would watch people's lives and say, okay, they got what I want. Not in a literal sense, and I don't want to steal their stuff, but I want to see, how did you accomplish that?
What are the fruits, if you will, of what they're doing? Is it the fruits that I would like? And
yeah.
And I wanted to kind of, it almost sounds like, when you said before that you had to figure out what could you put in place of, the life that you had before, like what habits, maybe bad or whatever, or otherwise, to replace it with something that you can build with, versus destroying with. So finding, and I think that's the key. You really hit a nail pretty hard there with saying, if you're going through a challenge and a failure, what can you do to if you have a free time, become the devil's playground, if you will. But what can you now do to look and to find mentors to help you to fill that void, which that other life had encompassed for a lot of your years and actually caused you to go. So I wanted to now go into when you started to taking your experience to someone else, going a little bit more international. And I know your wife is from another country, but how did that manifest? Because I suspect you didn't exactly go from, hey, I just got out of this, to just, I am doing this program, and I think I'm gonna go over to Asia, and I'm gonna find a beautiful woman and ask her to be my wife. And I've met Cassie enough to probably say she probably was not gonna say yay straight out of the first day that you got out of incarceration. So talk us through how'd you jump all the way into international traveling and speaking and ministering and helping people and orphans and those who needed you.
Okay, so that's the front line. That's like on stage. So like behind the stage of a life for me of a recovering addict. Behind that, that's what I talked about. I had to learn how to manage my emotions and all this and this. Well, then you get on stage, if you would, what people see. And so basically, without giving every little detail, while I was in prison, the Lord began to speak to my heart about the Philippines. I didn't know, never heard of the Philippines, never any of that. I'll save the intricate details unless you specifically ask. But basically, the Lord was speaking to me, not audibly. Matter of fact, it's on my mind. I go to another Christian brother in prison. I'm like, hey, I keep on thinking of this country every day. I don't know why. He goes, maybe God's speaking to you. Excuse me. And I'm even like, I don't hear anything. And he's like, no, that's not what I mean. He goes, just pray about it. And if it stays on your mind, maybe God's talking to you about it. So by the end of my prison sentence, which I had about a year to go still, is that the Philippines stayed on my heart. So fast forward, I get out. I'm on social media. What I did one day is I went to Google. When I got out, Google was just getting hot. I didn't know much about it. I just punched in there Christian events in my area because I was trying to avoid the old life, the bars, the cookouts were things I shouldn't be around were, that kind of stuff. And I just clicked the first thing that popped up on the search, which I know now are just ads. I clicked it and it was a dating site. Clause, I'm not promoting dating sites. I'm not saying anyone should do it. For whatever reason, I went on there. And that's how I met my wife. I didn't know if it was a scam. There's all kind of things you hear. And so I asked her if she had Facebook. She said, yeah. We talked on Facebook. I shared her my story. She started talking to me. The only reason I was at all interested was because she was from the Philippines, and I forgot the Philippines on my heart. Now, also,
you know what? Whatever motivates. Don't hate the motivation. Whatever works. We're put there for a reason to get you to move. Apparently,
what ended up happening is I didn't know in no way that I feel God saying you're going to get a wife there. It was for ministry purposes. At least I thought. So now it's a bundle plan, I guess. Eventually, I told my wife at that time, I'm still on parole. I can't go out of the state, let alone the country. So she put up with me video chatting for 3 years. Wow. And I'll tell you, as soon as my parole date came up, well, I filed instantly. I got a visa, I got my passport, and I got on the first thing headed out of here. And I went and I met her. And by that time, I knew she was the one, but I still wasn't going to ask her over online. I wanted to meet her in person and kind of see how the vibe was. And it was great. And I asked her to marry me. She said yes. I moved back there. And in the meantime, God set up people in my life where I eventually preached at revivals and different churches there in the Philippines. It's crazy that as now a pastor, my first exposure to like preaching and like ministry was actually kind of in the Philippines, a whole different country. And now as we fast forward, my wife started and I've partnered with her, and we even have a church in Oklahoma who has partnered with us to feed children there in a particular part in the Philippines. And so weekly, I'm just a recovering addict guy who God changed his heart. The Bible teaches me he who stole, let him steal no more, but work hard with his hands in order to have those to give to those who have need. And so every week between my wife and I and a partner church, we feed and minister to and teach anywhere between 70 to 100 kids a week, all the way in another country. And so that process has taught me so much. It's helped my recovery. It's helped me as a pastor. It's helped me as a man being exposed to another country, another culture, let alone being married to someone from another country, another culture.
And then also having that positive influence because, you benefit, but also, the other partner church or the children that you minister with and that you help them. So it all works out. It all works out. But I don't think had you gone on that mission, that trip that took you, into incarceration, we wouldn't see this person today. And I think when I first met you, and I was like, this is probably one of the most unique pastors I've ever come upon because he literally tells you he exposes himself. I mean, not in the literal sense, but exposes his mistakes. And that is what I think was most attractive. And I was like, this is different. And because I come from a very, religious background, and you and I talked about that, you see people have the veneer. And I've seen the veneer. And because I've been very active as a child and very high up in various religious groups, you can see the veneer and it's shining, it's great. But when you're a kid, the kids don't miss much. I mean, parents can lie to each other and adults will lie to each other, but children spot all the problems. And when you have infighting and all this other stuff and lies and steals and everybody's trying to hide their faults, I think the fact that you did say, hey, I'm going to tell you up front, these are my faults. I got them, but that doesn't stop me, and it shouldn't stop you either.
Yeah.
So you have a mission, you have a passion, you have a power, you have something that's residing, was given to you at birth, and that you should own it. But sometimes that path may take you on some interesting journeys because it's there not for you only, it's for the other person who you have to minister to down the road. So that is probably one of your most attractive traits to me as a man and as a father, is just to see another man who's broken, but also can show other men how to do it. And also a young father. And when I say young, I mean young as in a newborn, but also an older father versus the one who's like 20 something years old.
Hey, I kind of want to make a point, if it's okay. I don't want to turn the interview around on you, but I want to ask you a question. If I asked you, how did you learn to love on your sons? How would you answer that?
It took some time because I had to first love myself. And my mom has been very influential in being very loving. You know, my mother is a very loving, affectionate person. And so it's not uncommon for me to, my dad was loving, but he wasn't that kind of, he wasn't a huggy buggy kind of guy. My mom was more that. So I had to learn how to first love myself.
Okay.
And then realize, and as I grow as a parent, I mean, I'm not perfect. I tell you, I mess up every single day. I'm pretty sure my kids can spot the 20 different mistakes I made today. But it's to understand that each person has their unique qualities. And I think as a parent, that's the beauty, is not to treat each child the same, because each one of them have different motivations, they have different passions, they have different desires. But just to see them achieve something they wanted to do. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. My son likes video games and he wants to be a gamer. And for me, I see games as, a distraction sometimes. But for him, it's a whole different ball game. For him, it's a potential business model for him. So he's a little bit more, kind of lateral than, and I'm thinking, it's kind of like the parent that says, don't go into music, go into something more, stable, get a job or something like that. And then you go on to follow that passion. So I think as I go and I learn, and every day is a learning process. You have to learn how to forgive.
One of the reasons that I share, for a couple reasons, it's a bundle of reasons why I'm open about my stuff. Number one, I do want to say this. We should never take on the attitude. I never take on this attitude like, here's my stuff, ha, ha, ha. I can keep on with my junk, and I admit it, so it's all good. I can just continue in my junk. That's not the purpose. But the purpose is I'm just like everybody else. And I think that it's like you said, when our sons and our children and those around us see how we react when we don't get it right, and that's how I learned. I watched other men, how when they didn't get it right, or when they did, like you said, I asked you that question for a reason. I had my son just 8 months ago when I just started pastoring the church, and you went there. And while I'm not writing a book or anything, I notice how you love on your boys, right? And that rubs off. That influences me. I'm going to pick my son up during service. I want to take him down there and hold him with me. I want to love on my boy because Nikkei can love on his boys. Not in the sense that I want to be like you or I want to be showy, but you open that environment up. You see what I'm saying? Here you are, an Army guy, but if I was to judge, he's just a strict guy, or he's, how it can come across, you're a military parent, they're strict, but no, you open up that environment. I made that to make the point that in recovery, we say we can only keep what we have by giving it away. And so you asked the question about influencing others and how we watch other people's lives. That's just a practical example. I thought was a great opportunity to share that practical example. That
I think you really you hit the crux of what you said earlier. You watch other people to see what their fruits are, and it's not that you want to steal it, like you said, but you're saying, I see those fruits, and I I'd like some of that fruit.
Yes.
I can do that if they're getting every. And I think for men, and this is unique because I think a lot of men, especially when men who are trained, like military people, are trained with bravado. The only time you hug a man is at a football game. I mean, literally, or you're drunk, or
Yeah.
it has to be something. And if a man is, holding their son, it's sort of, you might get that weird feeling or something like that. But because my mother had a heavy influence, and I saw other fathers, like a father I know of named Baba Jesse. And again, the second question, and I didn't answer it, was, and I know this is your interview, was like you said earlier, watching other fathers. Now, another father that I admire, he has grown boys, and he's very affectionate with his boys. And he's now, a grandfather, and his kids are all grown. But he, like me, I watched and I said, how do you raise 3 boys? Because you sort of got to look for, if somebody has 2 girls and a boy, or 2, it sort of gets kind of, but you want to see what it's like, or you have a parent who has 3 girls, and you're like, well, that's not the, I'm looking for somebody who has 3 boys, and that's kind of what you look for. And you say, how did they make it through it? And I'm sure him and his wife, Linda, it wasn't peaches and cream. He was a basketball coach, and he had to be a coach, he had to be a dad, he had to be a husband, he had to be a breadwinner, he had to be a political activist. It's like a whole bunch of titles, but he also had to be an affectionate father. And it doesn't take away from your masculinity, but if anything, it enhances them because it helps them to learn that men can love on each other, and that love can be translated into how they love their potential spouse down the road. That, hey, I can love, but I can also love my spouse and treat her appropriately. So I think that makes sense. I hope I didn't go too long and take too long.
No, absolutely. I've watched other men, just like you said, and not to, I think we can judge things and discern things without condemning someone or treating someone like they're less than. But, I've been around in recovery long enough that I've seen people, and in the church, that I've seen Christian men or recovering men and said, well, they're clean, but I don't necessarily want exactly what they got going on. Like, they're still got a lot of anger in there, whatever it is. And they have a process just like me. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to condemn anybody, but I will know that ain't the person that is my example right now. And so I can ask people, about those things, get advice. And I learned early on, I can't do this thing alone if I'm going to, because heck, at that point in my life, I was in prison using, that's where it led me. So apparently whatever I was doing wasn't cutting it, and I had no room for complaining. I had no room I didn't have a leg to stand on, but I do thank the Lord that other men have responded to being men, that for me to look to, get advice from, and watch their walks. And then that obviously, I went from a point in my life where I felt like a nobody, like I'd never amount to nothing. Like I felt like as low as you can feel, and been called a lot of names by police officers and U.S. Marshals, and probably for the right reasons. But I couldn't attach myself to that person. I had to own that and let that go in order to move forward, or else I'd never be able to stand behind a pulpit or walk down an aisle with a woman. Changing my whole life, I made a vow to myself when I was like 17 that I would never marry because it's stupid. And all I want to do is be a player, Man, I'm so glad I didn't stick to that.
Yeah, that right there usually gets you in trouble in many ways.
Yeah.
But as we bring it to the close, and we're with a couple of seconds left, and I want to give you an opportunity to, if anyone wants to come in and hear your talks, and I'll call them talks. Some people call them sermons, but let's just say your talks, which I always find insightful because I tend to close my eyes and just listen, in versus looking at the visuals, kind of listening in. Little thing I learned from someone else, how to pay attention without using your eyes. But if somebody, what would you say is the one thing you'd like to leave? If let's just say, if you know your superpower, and let's just say you know your superpower, what is that superpower? What is it that you believe you have that can help other people?
I would say encouraging and just living out my example. I would tell, and I would tell people this, that I want to help people who where I once been. And it's this, look, it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you made or what you did. You could have done messed your life all the way up. But today, you can choose today to start making a difference. You can choose today to start changing. You can choose today to go a different route. I think a lot of us, we just get comfortable in that rut. We get comfortable in our own mess. We get comfortable right where we are. And it's so hard to get out. And if I ever, any time I have the chance, I love to just tell people, because you never know who's going to hear what you have to say at anywhere. And it's, you can change. There's hope. It's possible, no matter what you've done, no matter where you are. And it don't have to relate to addiction. It can be anything. There's people out there right now who are curled up in a ball on their couch or in their bed because they're depressed and they feel like there's no hope for them. There's people who are gambling right now who are so compulsive that they're going to go home and maybe wind up in divorce because they spend up all their money. There's people who live with, postpartum, whether it been from wars or trauma in their childhood, and they feel like they're broken and they'll never be able to be repaired. They'll always feel like this. And then there's people like me who are down in addiction or been through divorce or all sort of situations that this world offers us that we feel like this, there's no hope, we'll never get it. But here's what I would say to them. There is hope. You can decide today to make the change. And there are people who love you and there are people who care. Unfortunately, sometimes we got to sift through, a lot of folks to find them, but they're there.
I agree. So if someone wants to come in and hear your talks on Sunday and after some, you're doing another program coming up, and unless you want to disclose what that is, but maybe not yet. But if somebody wants to hear your talks, where should they come to?
Well, you can come to New Beginnings Church of the Nazarene, and it's in Winston-Salem. It's 4555 Shadowlawn Drive, and I believe that's the north side of Winston-Salem. Again, that's 4555 Shadowlawn Drive. We meet there 11:30 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Or since this is live, people can probably comment if they want to inquire, if they want to reach out. And I think I can speak on behalf of Nikkei when I say, if you're going through something, you can reach out to myself or Nikkei. We're here for you. And I always tell people, test me, because a lot of folks say that, but when the number gets dialed, they're busy. I'm out here. There's nothing more important than distilling hope in other people. We're here. And Celebrate Recovery is the program that we haven't started yet, that we're working on for the future. But just know that that's where we are. We have a Facebook page too, New Beginnings, Church of the Nazarene in Winston-Salem as well. You can tune in there. We usually try to stream the videos live and post them afterwards as well.
All righty. Well, thank you again, Pastor Jimmy, for being here today and being able to share, your transparency, your message, your encouragement, your family, and time away from, I don't hear him now.
Yeah, mom's got him taken care of.
He's good. Okay. And being able to share. And those of you who are at home or wherever you are, if you're online or you're at home or wherever you are, you're welcome to comment. Go ahead and comment. I'm sorry, I usually ask somebody to comment, but sometimes the subject matter gets so engaging, I forget to say, please ask a question. So ask a question, and we'll go ahead and do that. And always know that there is hope. Like Jimmy said, there's hope, there's encouragement, and there are people out here who are here for you. All you simply have to do is ask and make a choice, like he said. So thank you very much, Jimmy. Thank you, honored guest, and we'll see you next time. Remember, success happens, but you have to have a little failure generally first before we can appreciate those successes. So
absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, brother.
You're welcome.